webinar on my name's Marketing Manager at Cengage, and I'll be hosting our discussion.
Hi there, my name's Stuart Webster, and as Sophie said, I'm the Digital Solutions Manager here at Cengage, and I'll be working with her on this webinar this morning. Just a few things to get us started and to make sure that we are set off on the right track. You should be able to see in the middle of your screen at the moment our main presentation space. So this is where we'll put up poll questions. So this is going to be quite an interactive session. So we're going to put up some questions, get you to engage with what's going on during the session. So that's in the middle. Below that, we have our chat room. So that's what we're going to use to have a conversation. So we want to get you guys engaged. We want to get your ideas and your thoughts about what we're talking about today. So if everybody could put in a hi or a hello into the chat room, just so we know that you found it. Okay, there's a few of you. Just wait for a few more just to make sure that everybody is on board and they can hear what's being said and in the session. Thank you, Juliet. Thank you, Carol. And I see Deborah's in there. Cool. So you will see Higher Education Marketing 3 in the chat room. That's Anna. She's part of our marketing team. So she's going to run the chat room today and chat with you guys. Final piece from me at the moment is to let you all know the session is being recorded. So we record everything that's going on the screen, the chat room, and all of the audio. And that's so we can share the recording with you after the event and for those who've not been able to make. And so we will share it with you and you'll be able to see not just what's on the screen and what we say, but also the chat room as well. Sophie, back over to you.
So just to let you know, we've created a certificate of attendance. So if you'd like to receive one of these, you just put your name in the chat room. We'll make sure we get one of those sent out to you after the session. So to start off with, I wanted to give a quick overview of what we're going to cover today and why we chose to do a webinar looking at the benefits of active learning. So firstly, we're going to look at what active learning is and why it's important. Then we'll go on to discuss some of the active learning techniques that lecturers are currently using and how effective these are. We'll then talk about some of the challenges that implementing active learning techniques might pose to you in your teaching. And then finally, at the end of the session, we should have some time for any questions you might have or anything further you'd like to discuss. So what is active learning? Active learning is an approach based on activities and encouragements to take part in the learning. This is in contrast to more traditional methods of teaching, where the lecturer is trying to transmit knowledge to the student as they simply sit and listen. So in short, active learning is any learning activity which involves the active participation of the student. It's learning via engagement with the content. It puts students at the heart of the learning experience and enables them to become much more engaged with their own learning. Now, the use of active learning methods in higher education is becoming increasingly popular, and it's something we're hearing about more and more in our conversations with lecturers. I imagine some of you have experience using active learning techniques to enhance your teaching or within your classroom. So as Stuart said earlier, it'd be really great if this webinar could be as interactive as possible. And if you could share your ideas about what's working for you or what might not have worked for you so that we can get some ideas together. As Stuart mentioned, we'll be using poll questions throughout the webinar today that relate to this topic to get the discussion going. Please feel free to participate using the chat room.
Sophie, I'm just going to jump in there for a moment. I've been keeping an eye on the chat room and a few people are having a challenge hearing your audio, and it seems mine's coming through a little bit clearer. So whilst the guys answer some of those questions that you've just asked about what experience they've got about engaging students and what policies they're going to have, I'm going to suggest you switch studios and come and join me in here, so we can so everybody can see us on one camera, and hopefully they'll all be able to hear us as well.
Sounds good.
Okay, so well, Sophie jumps ship and changes spaces. I'm going to jump in there. Hopefully you can all hear me. If you can't, please let me know. So Sophie was there. She was talking about what we're going to cover today and how we're going to use the chat room and some of the market research we've done, and to want to know what techniques that you're already using as lecturers, and how you're engaging your students and what techniques you're using for active learning. Okay, so we're going to get Sophie to come around and join me now. Okay, so there we go. Right, and now you get to see us both together. I'm going to move that out of the way slightly so you can all see Sophie as well as hear us, and you should still be able to pick that up. Okay, Sophie, so are we jumping on to the next slide?
Yes, let's move on. So in putting together this webinar, we looked at various sources of research into active learning and the benefits of it. And there was a study conducted by the National Academy of Sciences in the US that showed that students in a traditional lecture course are 1.5 times more likely to fail compared with students doing the same course where active learning is encouraged. And how active learning can be used to improve student outcomes is something we can go on to discuss further in this webinar. Studies also show that when material is delivered using a single method, i.e. when a lecturer is simply presenting to students, students' concentration limit is between 10 and 20 minutes. Therefore, to maximise the impact that your lectures will have and the amount of information that students will retain, it's important to consider using different techniques to actively engage students in their learning. There was also a study conducted by the Joint Information Systems Committee that was completed by 10,000 HE students, and the feedback indicated that students want more interactivity in their courses, and they want an end to what they call death by PowerPoint. So active learning is not just about how lecturers want to teach, but about how students want to learn. Student satisfaction is a really important factor to consider here, and as students are paying more and more for their tuition fees, it's important that they consider they're getting value for money. So from there, I wanted to move on to our first poll question, and the idea of this is really just a simple question to get an idea of where you are with active learning. Is it something you've used in your teaching before, or is this something that's completely new to you? So if we move on to that now, Stuart.
Yep, so here's our first poll question, as Sophie said. So you should be able to see it on your screen at the moment. So have you used active learning techniques in your teaching? So this is a straightforward yes or no. So we'll just keep an eye on your answers. We'll give you a little bit longer to take an opportunity to answer. And oh, somebody changed their mind there. Okay, so we're nearly there. So take that opportunity to vote. So this is going to be the first of several poll questions that we'll use throughout the session. Okay, if you've not taken your opportunity to vote, please jump in now. Oh, we're nearly there. Okay, so it looks like everybody's voted, so let's share those results with you. Okay, so you should be able to see the results on your screen now, and clearly a big push towards the yes there, Sophie.
Yes, that's really great to see actually that lots of you are already using these techniques in your teaching, and hopefully that means we'll have various things we can discuss and talk about what's worked for you. As we move on to the next poll question, we'll look into sort of actually what types of active learning techniques you're looking to use or you have used before. And actually, it'd be interesting for those of you that have answered no, if you wouldn't mind commenting in the chat room why you've just haven't decided to try these techniques. Is it just that it's a different way of teaching?
Thought someone's commenting there. They seem to have stalled. Oh, no, not at the moment.
Okay, so let's move on to our second poll question. So looking at the types of active learning techniques that you have tried using or you're thinking about using for your course.
Okay, so here's our next poll question up on the screen now. So Sophie said, what types of active learning techniques are you looking to use in your course, or possibly things that you're using already? So this is a multiple choice one, so you don't have to just pick one thing. You can pick as many as relevant to you as you wish. Also, if there's something we've missed, or if you want to comment on one of the areas that are in our poll question, please use the chat room to do that, and it will really help us get a better understanding about what you're doing, how you're teaching, what resources you're using, and maybe some positive or negative experiences you have from trying some of these ideas. So the vote's going well. Please take that opportunity to vote if you haven't already.
And this is by no means an exhaustive list, so if there's anything else that you're trying, please feel free to pop it in the chat room.
Yeah, absolutely. The more we can hear from you, the better the session will be. So certainly a big push towards getting the students to do more at the moment. We'll put these results up on the screen in a moment. Okay, just a few more people who haven't voted, so if you haven't taken that opportunity, please jump in and share your ideas and your thoughts with us. Okay, so Gemma putting a question out there of anybody who has experience of using the flipped model and what successes they've had with that. And what we've got from Deborah there. Okay, and an interesting point there from Deborah, so we'll follow up on that in a moment, maybe, Sophie. So it looks like you've all finished voting, so let's close that and share your results. So you should see them on your screen now. So lots of student presentation discussion. Few people who've put other in there, so maybe you'd expand upon what other is. Maybe that, Deborah, maybe that's you with your scenario-based group work.
Yes, it's interesting that lots of you are incorporating student presentations and discussions. And research shows definitely that when students are doing more than listening, they're able to develop higher level skills in applying, analysing and evaluating the course material, rather than simply remembering and understanding content that they've had delivered to them. So that's definitely an effective method of active learning. Some of you have also put group projects there as well, and that's another great way to help students develop skills such as communication skills. And also in a group project scenario, it gives perhaps lesser able students the opportunity to work alongside students who are already achieving higher grades, so they may benefit in this way as well. I can see some people have indicated they've tried the flipped classroom approach as well. And we've actually carried out a case study at the National University of Ireland in Galway on a foundation marketing course, which had 450 students on it. And they were using an online learning tool. And they used the flipped classroom approach, where students were given instructions outside of the classroom, and then they used the time in the lectures to do what's traditionally considered to be homework. And by using this approach, they managed to increase the pass rate of the course from 50% up to 97%. And the lecturer really put this down to the increased engagement of students due to the flipped learning approach. And the lecturer commented that the students loved the fact that they're in control of their studies, and and that they're managing their own engagement.
Cool. I was just looking at some of the stuff in the chat room there, and Gemma and Deborah seem to be having a good conversation. James, or James 1, I just wanted to come back to a point you made earlier. So you said very limited. Students ironically appear to want info/data, but little input. And I was just wondering how, if you were to go down that method of providing them with large amounts of data and information, how do you then assess and understand whether they're able to contextualize that and use that information you're providing? Is that something that you've moved towards, or is this just maybe a comment on experience you have from the students you're working with? I feel bad getting in the middle of Deborah and Gemma's conversation at the moment. Seems to be having a good conversation. Deborah seems to be a big advocate on group work, and you mentioned a moment ago, Sophie, about looking at group work as a way of getting stronger students to share ideas with weaker students. I just wondered, Deborah, given your experience, is that something you're working towards? Is getting some of those more able, high scoring students to be able to share their experiences and their knowledge with some of the weaker students? Okay, James is back with us as well. Lots of typing going on at the moment. I'm surprised to see the flipped model not as strong as I thought it might be. Just to give you an idea of some of my experience, I work with lecturers and students across Europe and the Middle East and Africa, and certainly the flipped classroom model is something that I get asked about quite a lot, and how other universities and other courses that I've worked with, how they use that flipped model. And there are lots of good examples of it being used well. Certainly in South Africa, I've seen some very good practices of how it's being used, but not a big score on today's chart. And I just wondered if anybody had a lot of experience of moving into that flipped model, and whether it was positive or negative. So I'm just reading James 1's comment, which is an answer to a question I asked earlier. So, comment on experiences. We do use group work, small discussion groups, maximum of 8 students. Those sessions are more interactive and with more impact. And do you feel like the students find that a valuable way to learn, James? Is that something that they're having a really positive experience from? You mentioned earlier about them wanting lots of data. I wondered if that challenged the way that they maybe felt comfortable learning. James is coming in. And something there from Carol Lee. I use video regularly. I think this was off a question from Gemma. Upload to use for Moodle, to use at home, to access them on their phones. So lots of use of video, and that's something that seems to be a common thread with instructors, is the use of video as a way of engaging students and getting them thinking by being able to share more material with them. Cool. Do you want to move on, Sophie, or do you want to give the guys a bit more time?
I think let's move on, because it's been really interesting to hear about some of the techniques you're using, but now it would be a great idea if we could discuss some of the key benefits that you think active learning offers. So if we could move on to the next poll question. Yeah,
I can do that. So here we go. So question 3, what do you consider to be the key benefits of active learning? And again, this is a multiple choice. You can answer as many of the questions, or take as many of the options as you want. So we'll give you a couple of minutes just to jump in and have a look at those. And as we said before, this is not a definitive list. If there are other areas that you feel techniques or ideas or benefits that you're seeing, please share those in the chat room. Okay. Oh, everybody's jumped in on that one much more quickly. Quite surprised. I was reading the chat room and it came in. And thank you for that comment there, Karen Wilkes in the chat room. Sorry about your sound issue, but good to see you've had a chance to catch up in the chat room. So we'll just give you another minute or so to answer if you haven't taken the opportunity yet on that current question. Yeah, I think I agree, James. I think, as Karen said, using the flip model as a way to get the students engaged with more of the content and cover more of the curriculum. And I wonder if that's something that anybody else in the session today has experienced. Karen's point there that she uses the flipped learning, and she doesn't have time to cover the whole curriculum. There's a question there for Karen from Imitaz in the chat room. Okay, so I think everybody who's going to vote has taken that opportunity, so we'll put those results up. And you can see those on the screen now.
So yeah, really mixed range of responses, and I suppose really there are lots of different benefits to active learning. There isn't one key benefit. A lot of you have put that it's really important that it enables students to develop skills such as critical thinking and problem solving. I think that's really important when you're thinking about preparing students for the world of work and thinking about what other skills they can develop through their course. So when they're doing more than simply listening and having information transmitted to them, they have the opportunity to apply the information they're learning and analyse it, evaluate the course material. So I think that's definitely a really important benefit that a lot of you have indicated. Also, increasing student engagement. A lot of you have responded that that's a key benefit. And research has shown that active learning has been proven to make students much more engaged in their own learning and take a lot more ownership of their learning.
Cool. I was interested, there was some point there on point 4 there, which was a high score of it increases student satisfaction. And I was just interested as to how, I mean, lots of you chose it. Is your students being satisfied, to take context of the question? That's something that you think about when you're looking at how you're going to deliver content and materials within your course. Is that student satisfaction? Is students being happy with the way that you're making content and material available to them an important thing? Seems to be lots of conversations going on in the chat room at the moment as well. Still lots of stuff around video and how that's being used. So Gemma, I'm presuming that's an answer to my previous question. So I want them to come along and contribute. Yeah. So there's conversation there going on about video still. So if any of you've got any comments on student satisfaction or how much that comes into your mind when you're working on building your courses and thinking about how students are going to engage with content, whether it's an important thing for you. Thank you for that, Deborah. So Deborah said the students tend to find satisfaction from sharing their ideas, being able to help with problem solving, and having their ideas considered. So, I mean, I guess like anybody, they've been recognised for the ideas and their contribution is something that's important to them. And the group work that you talked about earlier, Deborah, and I think James Wan was talking about, I guess, is a strong part of that, allowing students to have a voice and to be able to contribute, and not just in your class, but also in learning and supporting their peers. Okay, and James there feeling it's clearly stating it's a very strong thing and part of their philosophy. Anything you picked up there, Sophie, that you wanted to focus on?
I was just thinking again about student satisfaction. I think perhaps that's something that lecturers need to consider more and more with the increase in tuition fees, with students paying maybe £9,000 a year. Perhaps that's something that comes into play even more, that they're getting value for money, or they consider they're getting value for money out of their course and their tuition time.
Okay. Yeah, and certainly in the UK, I mean, obviously there are people in the session today who are non-UK based, so those funding models are slightly different, but certainly that's a key point for the UK market.
Of course, yeah.
Satisfaction means different things to different students. That's a really good point, Aziz. And Karen, before you, so students are presenting what they've studied outside of university, and they take pride in their work, which is clearly very important. And I guess having that opportunity to work in groups, to be able to share their ideas and to bounce stuff off their peers is a key part of that learning process. And as somebody said earlier, helps build that student satisfaction. Some really key points there. Cool. So, oh yeah,
something's still coming in.
He's trying to keep an eye on the chat room and everything that's going on. Okay, maybe we'll move on and jump back on that in a moment.
Yes, I think let's move on to our final poll question. And this question is really looking at what are some of the challenges you face when it comes to integrating active learning techniques into your course. So when we asked the first question about whether or not you have used active learning techniques in the past, some of you did answer no, and perhaps that's because some of the challenges that you might be experiencing when it comes to thinking about changing your teaching style to incorporate some of these techniques. So if we move on to the final poll question.
Yeah, I can do that. So let's bring up that last question. So as Sophie said, that final poll question, so what types of active learning techniques are you using in your course? Is that the wrong question?
Yeah, I think that's a repeat.
Is that a repeat of an earlier question?
Yeah.
Sorry, my mistake. Let me get a correct question for you.
There we go. That's the final question.
There's the final question. Sorry about that, folks. My mistake. So what challenges do you face when it comes to integrating active learning techniques into your course? Again, this is a multiple choice one again, so select as many as you feel are appropriate. And again, if we've missed something, we feel there are other challenges that we haven't got, please jump into the chat room and let us know about those. Okay, so oh, it's a strong leader this time, but still a few people to vote. So if you haven't taken the opportunity to vote on this question, please jump in and share your thoughts with us. There's still a few people left to go. Thank you for that, Gemma. Oh, lots of people jumping in there.
Lots of challenges.
Oh, there's lots going on. Still a few people left to vote. We're just about there. It's great to see such an active chat room. Thank you all for contributing and sharing your ideas and thoughts with each other. I mean, I've seen lots of thank yous in there as well, so clearly people getting value out of the conversations today. Okay. Do you think we're done there, Sophie?
Yeah, I think we can end that one.
Okay. The results are up on the screen now. So a real mixture there, but a real leader there, with effort and time to change the way you teach.
And that's not surprising if you've been lecturing for 5 years, for 10 years. You've got used to a certain way that you're teaching your course material. Perhaps you've got research commitments on the side. So that's that's quite an obvious challenge, I think, having that time to sort of think about how you can incorporate different active learning techniques in your teaching when you've been doing something a certain way for a period of time. So I'm not surprised that that's a popular choice.
Yeah, I mean, I think time's one of those key things, and looking for some strategies. There's some really good points in the chat room. I'm worried one of them's just disappeared. It was Karen Wilkes one. So once you've overcome the challenges, and it's an easier method of delivery. So it looks like Karen spent some time on that already, and I guess once you've got into a new workflow and address some of those time challenges, certainly for Karen, she finds it an easier way to teach. Gemma was talking about incorporating new practices, has put her off, and I think Deborah came back and answered that question, but I've lost it now. I don't know if you can see it in the thread. I was just looking for what the response was. I've lost it. Sorry, Deborah. I'm sure it was you who answered. One there from Laura. A new comment. I would add making sure the course is appropriate for different levels and different learning styles. Yeah, I mean, it's a really good point, Laura. One of the real challenges is making sure that those courses are accessible and providing ideas and materials and material for different kinds of learning styles. And I think the use of video materials and some of the ideas that we've had shared today, people seem very conscious of that.
And I think that could be an excellent way of starting off, as we talked about time being a real challenge. So perhaps you could have your traditional slides, but perhaps break up the content with some interactive content like video. So that could be a good way of starting off, incorporating some active learning techniques, or incorporate some student discussions or student presentations as part of your lecture. So perhaps we don't need to flip the whole way you're teaching initially, but just think about methods that you could use to incorporate a few different interactive activities into your lectures.
Yep, small steps. One of the things I've seen successfully used and really helps with both that idea of a flipped model and creating a more active learning environment is, rather than students doing presentations to a whole group of people, and that being a real time and space challenge, is actually recording their own presentations. That doesn't have to be complex. I've seen it done on smartphones, as well as using more traditional methods, and then using platforms, whether it's the LMS or other online platforms, to be able to share those in groups and get some peer feedback. So being able to put ideas out there. Again, I think somebody mentioned earlier about being able to cover the whole curriculum, so utilizing non-contact time with students and getting them to participate in either group or even individual activities that allows them to then get some feedback from their peers. And we've heard already today that peer feedback really strengthens students' confidence.
So Stuart's mentioned digital a bit, and tools that can be incorporated into your LMS. And I think certainly using a digital solution is one way that you could try to overcome some of these challenges. And we actually worked with a lecturer at Ulster University in Northern Ireland. He was teaching an economics course of about 100 students, and his challenge was providing a high level of engagement to a large group of students and keeping them students motivated, as attendance rates and pass rates were an issue. So he trialled a digital solution called Mindtap, which incorporates resources such as readings, multimedia activities, practice assessments and answers, and the lecturer can match this to their teaching schedule. And by using this digital tool, the students were able to interact with the course material, and the result was that course attendance rates improved and failure rates dropped to fewer than 10% compared to 30% previously. So that's just using a digital solution is one way that you could look to incorporate some of these techniques into your course.
Cool. There's lots of conversation going on at the moment, Sophie. There was a couple of bits. Karen Wilkes one, again, who I picked on lots today, just keeps catching my eye. Clearly, lots and lots of experience over 22 years. Karen, the idea of using a coaching model rather than a more traditional teaching model, I think that's really interesting. I have a background in corporate training and coaching. I think it's a really great model. I wonder with larger classes how you would manage that, but certainly a model, and certainly looking at different ideas of supporting and developing students looks really exciting. And thank you for the comment there on Mindtap as well. Always appreciated. Lots of conversations going on still about creating video and uploading resources and how that's done. I think Carol Lee talked about just doing it on your phone. Certainly from my experience of working with lots of institutions and from being somewhat of a techie, students really aren't worried massively about quality. So using a phone and just uploading resources, whether that's to, I think Carol mentioned Moodle, but wherever you're uploading that material to, it's about the content and the ideas that are there. Using a phone is a perfectly acceptable way, and students use them every day. So that certainly is a model that we see working. And Facebook's made it in for the first time today as one of those models, and certainly something that we see being used. Sophie, anything else you picked up or wanted to mention?
I think it's great to see all this discussion in the chat room, actually. So thank you so much for your participation. It's brilliant to see all your comments.
Yeah, it's lots of good stuff there. I think from my side, looking at the conversations and some of the things that have been mentioned, I mean, clearly lots of you are trying new ideas. I think that creation of content, whether it be through simple web tools or through using your phone and just making it available, and through your learning management system, VLE, so your Blackboard, your Moodle, Desire to Learns, and it's taking those steps. Somebody mentioned it earlier that these things are certainly more time consuming initially and can be, it's one of those big challenges, but once you've made that step and started to move into doing that stuff, it becomes much easier, and certainly can bring a new thread and a new vitality to the way that we're delivering material to students. And I think certainly the smartphone model is something that we see working successfully, both students and their lecturers creating new material and sharing it that way. Well, I think they've run out of chat, Sophie.
I'm a bit conscious about time anyway, so I think
okay.
Possibly let's move on to, does anyone have any questions that or anything further they'd like to discuss at this point?
Really good point from Carol there. Steady hands often is helpful. You don't want your students feeling seasick while they're watching your videos. But as you said, just resting phones up against materials. I've certainly recorded material that's been shared with large numbers of people by resting phones up against piles of books or up against the edge of a desk. So it certainly doesn't have to be a complex or expensive solution. I guess it's back to that problem solving, something that we constantly talk about to the students about being problem solvers and finding solutions ourselves to some of those issues. And as he's mentioning there, the pros and cons of using Facebook and whether students become distracted. And I think there's lots of opinions on that, Aziz, you're right. I mean, certainly taking your students into an environment which is where lots of their social engagements and activities happen does have potential risk of those them becoming distracted. I suppose equally, if they're spending lots of time there, they might actually fall upon some of your material and spend some time watching that rather than cat videos and and chatting with their friends, or maybe doing them at the same time. Cool.
All right, I think we should round up then.
Okay, so that one.
Yeah, so thank you again for all of your contributions, your participation today. It's been really interesting to read some of your comments in the chat room. We'll be in touch with you. As we've said, we're recording today's session, so if you'd like to listen again, we'll be sending that round. We're also putting together an infographic based on some of the responses to the poll questions, so hopefully that will be interesting as well to circulate to you. Also, over the next couple of weeks, we're putting on some other webinars. So we have one on the value of insights and analytics, and also a webinar on success in student engagement strategies. So they're both taking place this month, and the sign-up link should be in the chat room for you to sign up to those. If you've got any more questions, please feel free to get in touch with Stuart. His email's on the screen there. We'd love to hear from you if you'd like to continue any of the conversations we've had here today.
Many people already signed up. Thank you, Deborah. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, and I'd just like to thank you all. As Sophie said, grab my email address off the screen if you've got any questions on what tools and resources, materials Cengage have that might be useful to you. I'm more than happy to have a chat and discuss what you're doing, what challenges you've got, what kind of solutions you're thinking about, and to see if there's anything we can do to help or to work with you on. And thank you for your time this morning. We appreciate you're all busy, but making time to come and chat with us, hopefully you found very useful. And everybody, the chat room, oh, everybody's getting in their request for the certificates. Cool.
Thank you very much.
Cheers all. We're going to turn off the cameras and the mic now, but we'll leave the chat room open for a little while just so you can leave any final comments or email addresses if you want us to send you material or you want us to get in touch. Thanks everybody. Have a good day.